I'm a fan.
That's Liz Grow, Pro Cannabis Media's newest show host for a new show, Calling All Growers with Liz Grow. Liz is a High Times TV personality who'll be joining our talk show program starting in February.
I picture a company that stands the test of time.
Stopping at nothing to meet the people who are growing this plant generation after generation.
Calling All Growers will be more than just another interview and talk show, especially if you subscribe to the Calling All Growers workshop and webinar. That's 2 weeks after the live talk show on the same growing network, Pro Cannabis Media and PCM TV.
This is a show about interviewing the top growers in the game. It's a platform where they can share tips, tricks, and secrets for those growers coming up. Cultivators are some of my favorite people in the world, and I can't wait to talk to some of these growers.
It all starts on Wednesday, February 9th, live at 8 p.m. Eastern on PCM TV, on Roku, Apple, and ProCannabisMedia.com. Subscription-only workshops 2 weeks later on the 23rd. Sign up today to hold your spot.
What's your favorite strain?
Free.
If you're a grower or interested in learning more, tune in or...
You're missing out. Calling All Growers with Liz Grow.
Well, here we are again, TGIF. Thank God it's Friday and another live edition of Green Rush Live, the Business of Cannabis talk show. As far as we know, the only 2-hour live Friday afternoon Business of Cannabis talk show in the universe. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. So happy to be here and so happy to be talking about the international scene of cannabis for the majority of this show. But at the top of the show, we always feature one interview. Usually it's a mover and a shaker, somebody who had something to do in the news, perhaps over the last week. We've had a lot of pretty impressive people on this show, from the CEO of MJ Biz, Chris Walsh, he comes on here all the time, to Chris Beals, the CEO of WM Technologies, which we know in the business is Weed Maps. He's been on with us as well. And now we welcome in not just one gentleman, but two gentlemen. Rick Thompson from Michigan is going to be my co-host today, and Edmund DeVeaux from the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. Edmund and Rick, great to see you guys. And again, thank you for joining me here on Friday.
Thank you, Jimmy.
All right. So the last time we saw Edmund was a few months ago, when New Jersey was just starting to come around to the fact that, hey, we've got to create an adult use market. What are we going to do? So Edmund, give us an update. I know the applications are in the works. I know there's plenty of news going on in New Jersey. Bring us up to date on what the scene is in business in the New Jersey cannabis scene.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. Good to see you again, Rick. So New Jersey, we're moving slowly but surely. I like to tell people that the grass is greener and we are getting to the other side. So as you pointed out, it was back in August of 2021, the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission actually published the regulations, or its first iteration of regulations. And from that point, it's been all work on their part, trying to put together the pieces, listening to the community, listening to the public. And the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association has been right there with them, trying to help them put things together. And as you pointed out, the adult use market is here, and it's here to stay. And as of December 15th, 2021, the application portal, in other words, we're not going to volumes, thousands of pages of documents being handed in, being rushed down to Trenton. It's an application portal. And that application portal opened up for 3 of the licensing categories of the 6, which includes cultivation, processing, and laboratory testing. And as of March 15th of this year, we expect the application portal to open up for retail establishments.
And how many applications might show up, and how many licenses are going to be distributed?
As of last count, we had about 300, a little over 300 applications in the portal, and they are divided up amongst the cultivation and processing.
Right.
So we expect to see hundreds more. The actual portal was opened with over 600 openings, but we're at 300 300 or so actual applications that have been submitted.
There you go. And Rick Thompson's from Michigan, a much more mature market than New Jersey, obviously, maybe even more mature than the Massachusetts market. In fact, I think it is. Rick, when he described slow and steady, I mean, has that changed in Michigan?
Well, actually, it's better than our launch here in Michigan. We tried to encourage the Marijuana Regulatory Agency to stagger licensure like you're doing in New Jersey, to put forth first cultivation and processing facilities and then license retail afterwards. Instead, they decided to do everybody all at once, and it created a big backlog of licensing also at the MRA, as well as in an uneven and unsteady marketplace. You had retailers that were open that had very little product to put on their shelves, and it was difficult for some of them to make bills right off the bat because we had such a variance there. So kudos to New Jersey for doing it in a more intelligent way.
And actually, I think that's an advantage for all the new states that are coming into the market. They can look at what happened in Washington State and Colorado, and then look at California and Arizona and Oklahoma, and perhaps learn what not to do, right, Ed, and try and make it work for that specific state.
You know, Jimmy, that's a great point. In fact, one of the things that we do in our communications with the community, that everybody wants it to happen, and we caution them. Look, there's no playbook. There's nothing in advance. This is being created from scratch. I know people refer to other states that are more mature than us, but every state is different. There's going to be 50 different ways, plus the District of Columbia, 51 different ways of doing this industry. And so what we're doing, Rick, thank you so much. I will definitely convey that because there's a few of us that have been, we've been saying, look, this is the way to go. We've been supportive of the CRC, much to the chagrin of those advocates that have pushed for so long, and I get it. But slow and steady wins the race.
There you go. Slow and steady wins the race. Isn't that Yertle the Turtle? And isn't that book about Mitch McConnell, I think, or something?
I think it goes back to Aesop, but you get whatever reference you want there, Jimmy.
Thank you, Rick. I do it too, but I just, every time I hear any kind of thing like that, that face comes into my brain for some reason.
Well, you know, to be cliche, and New York likes to poke their finger in our eye every now and then, but I always tell them, first of all, we beat you to it. So the tortoise did in fact beat the hare in that instance. And again, thanks again, Rick, for pointing out that this is probably the better way to go by and large.
Right.
Access to capital, Edmund, that's the biggest issue for everybody. I don't care if you're a grower, a cultivator, a testing lab, an entrepreneur. Everybody's looking to have access to capital. What's going on in New Jersey in regards to the social equity applicants, and are there any funds emerging that even they have a shot at taking advantage of?
You know, looking down the road at this challenge, the Regulatory Commission and the legislation are in agreement that if you are an applicant, that or actually if you're an investor, you can invest into up to 7 operations. Now, you can't get a majority stake, but it's allowing private capital to enter into the market. Now, we do have a couple of financial institutions that have come forward to do banking, but to your point, Jimmy, loans and grants are something in the future. It's being discussed, but allowing private capital to come in a regulated way, protecting the potential operator from venture capitalists or vulture capitalists, if you want to, again, be cliche, but we are in fact allowing for investment. So I'll digress just for a second, because that is one of the things that we found very challenging. We have social equity applicants. The state did a wonderful job by actually creating a definition for social equity applicant, and income was certainly one of those measures. And so we worry about the difference between somebody who likes cannabis and wants to be in business and somebody who's in business and wants to be in cannabis. So we want to make sure that we do the right things to protect new entrants into the private sector, period.
Gotcha. I gotcha. And it's interesting. Well, first of all, I got to ask about growth with the Cannabis Business Association. How many members do you have right now?
So we're looking at about 1,000 members.
Wow.
And in terms of our newsletters and our events, mostly our newsletters, we are actually touching over 2,000 people, majority in the state. I'm sure there are some people outside the state that receive our information, but we are in fact growing. We are getting larger companies to join now. In fact, and I may have mentioned it on your show, we view ourselves now as the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. Mm-hmm. We represent not only current license holders, one of whom sits on our board, but we represent future applicants and all of the ancillary businesses that are going to play in this market. So we are the Chamber of Commerce, and we're providing opportunities for all of them to get engaged in this.
Rick, you're pretty familiar with the businesses in Michigan as far as cannabis goes. I'm pretty sure you're involved with one association, aren't you? At least one, as you're an executive director of Normal. I know that in Michigan.
Right, but I'm not a member of any of the cannabis business organizations. We do have two very large cannabis business organizations here, or rather one very large numerically and one very large with reach. And one of them is a real son of a bitch, and one of them is a real compassionate, functioning, helpful organization. What are you doing in New Jersey to not develop that son of a bitch attitude that sometimes befalls cannabis business associations?
Well, if you watched yesterday's CRC meeting, one of them has crossed that son of a bitch threshold. Look, we are the first, and we are, in fact, the largest trade association in the state. Others have cropped up along the way, and I'm separating them from the advocacy organizations like Normal, like UMCR, like Minorities for Marijuana. So in terms of the business structure, there's only maybe two of us, but we represent the entire industry. The other one represents just the current license holders, of which there's 12. Mm-hmm. There's 12 that are being bought over from the old medical marijuana program. Now, we did, in fact, issue licenses based on 2018 and 2019 rounds that were held up in court, but they're months away from operating. So we may, in fact, see what you experienced, Rick, where you're going to see 2018, 2019 kind of running in and converging with the people that are in the portal today. But by and large, you've got us, and then you've got the Cannabis Trade Association, which just represents the license holders. And then you have a couple of others that are out there.
And there's normally specialty trade associations too, a producer or a processors trade association, a testing laboratory group, because there are special individual reasons why those particular industries would want to lobby on a unique basis as opposed to having just a generalized lobby effort. So I can see where any market, especially in a state as large as Jersey, would have multiple interests that would be reflected by business associations.
Now, what's interesting, to your point, Rick, and I may have missed the nuance there, the fact is, yes, the National Laboratory Association is present in New Jersey. And in fact, the Cannabis Business Association does, in fact, have a laboratory working group. We are working with a group of 7 or 8 labs that have come to us to say, look, we've got a message. Can you help us develop that message? We absolutely have recommendations for regulation. So yes, we are helping them.
So important when you go to talk to legislators that you have the actual people in the specific industry whose rules are being potentially changed by legislation, having those particular areas of specialty. In our experience, it really has worked out for those particular industries to be able to communicate with the lawmakers, not just on a statewide level, but also in some of the larger municipalities too, because oftentimes they develop rules which are contradictory to state rules and oftentimes don't make a lot of sense. I don't know if you've experienced that in New Jersey or not.
Well, it's interesting. We're getting there. Again, just going back to yesterday's CRC meeting, I did in fact receive some emails from the lab group that we're working with. And they have other recommendations, and we're going to move those recommendations forward. So it's a work in progress, to your point. Thank you.
Right. I do want to bring up an event that's happening I think it's next week because I just signed up for it. Our friends at ArcView in New York are running a webinar for the Minority Cannabis Business Association. And I want to give a plug out there because to me, this is what I'd like to see more of in this industry. You know, everybody's looking to make money, right? I mean, that's the object of the business game. Okay. Sometimes I lose track of that, but that's true. Okay. Now, and it's a money grab. Everybody wants to make it fast, get in, get out, make a killing, go retire, whatever you need to do. But again, that money pool, for the most part, is still being controlled by the white private equity person. We're starting to see some athletes create funds for social equity applicants. Now you've got ArcView, one of the largest funders in the world and in cannabis, is now at least doing some open webinars to share some of the education that they can with that group. This is what I want to see as socially responsible capitalism in place in cannabis. Is that what's going on in that world in New Jersey? And I'm sure you're familiar with the Minorities Cannabis Business Association too, Ed.
Yeah, so thank you, Jimmy. The thought is this, and I shared with you somewhat jokingly as we were planning for today, there's the one thing that keeps me up at night. And the one thing that does keep me up at night with respect to the industry is the fact that when we issued the regulations and when we passed the legalization legislation, I believe many minorities heard, if you're a minority, a woman, or a disabled veteran, you're going to get a license. And I believe that that's what people heard. And what we try to do is balance that notion of wanting success and tempering it so that you don't get disappointed, that you stay involved, that you, in fact, seek financial resources and not bankrupt yourself chasing a dream. So with that, we are engaged with a number of social organizations at the grassroots level, like the NAACP, like the Camden Business District or Business Association, the statewide Hispanic Chamber. And so we are reaching out to all of those individuals who probably need to develop business acumen. So that's the position that we're taking. And so we're addressing it. The legislation addresses it by mandating more or less certification points. Go to school, get certified, keep up with your education in this industry. So we have been addressing it. We want to continue to address it because it really is an issue that could really hurt the industry.
There's a question in the chat room from Miggy, who's one of our regular watchers and listeners, and he also takes part in the cannabis legalization news show that Thomas Howard produces out of Illinois every week. And Thomas is one of our correspondents for We Talk News. I can say I know that he called in a report yesterday because I listened to it. That being said, a question from the chat room is about the gray market. Now, first of all, that term itself is indefinable, undefined. You can't really define it, but you tell me what you think is the gray market in New Jersey. And Rick, that means you're going to get a chance to tell me what the gray market is in Michigan.
Rick, do you want to go first?
Well, I was the gray market in Michigan for a number of years. We had a chain of 5 illegal dispensaries in the state between 2009 and 2012. So when you talk about the black market, then the gray market, and then the regulated market, I think what you're talking about are facilities that look and feel and try to behave as much as possible like a regulated marketplace. For example, at Big Daddy's, our chain, we checked medical cards. We never sold to anyone that wasn't a registered patient. We never sold to anyone that was a minor. We were very careful about making sure there wasn't diversion of product. So there were a lot of ways in which the industry in Michigan, in the unregulated methodology, was still just as responsible as the regulated system today. And to be honest, we had 500 sites in the state of Michigan prior to 2016 when the medical marijuana laws, the business laws, came into effect. So it was quite a big thing here in the state. I think that's basically the difference between what we'd call the completely black market, the legacy market versus the gray market, trying to act as in a way that looks like a regulated function.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I'm in total agreement with what you've shared. legacy, all right? That is now the term.
It is.
Right.
Schooled, much like just a few years ago, stop calling it marijuana, it's cannabis. I'm like, okay. And then some people came to me and said, no, control the word, it's marijuana. Okay, I get it. So it is a legacy market, and our legislation is in fact, and the regulations are providing a way to come under the regulatory umbrella. So that's the push. It's not only expungement of records, but if you haven't had your records expunged, it's an opportunity. If you've just got a simple possession charge, we want you to come under the regulatory umbrella. Much to your point, Rick, there are those folks that are out there and they're pushing the limits. They're opening up consumption lounges. They're selling product because they're saying it's legal. They're allowing people to consume product in the shop because you can't get arrested. And so I look at those, and my concern is this. Some have a very professional downtown look and feel, and others have cropped up with big cannabis leaves painted on them, neon green. And I even heard one place has armed guards. Don't know how they got them. But that is the kind of thing that I want us to watch. I want us to be careful of. And look, if you're listening, please come under the regulated umbrella. Then this way we can avoid issues about carding people when they do come into a facility. We can handle issues like designs on buildings, what's appropriate for a downtown. Come under the umbrella. We want you there. But I get it. There's a lot of pride in legacy markets. Everyone knows the weed man, right? You say weed man nationally. Ed Forshawn in Trenton has been a legacy marketeer for decades and continues to do so. I don't think there's anybody that wants to tackle that issue. But Ed, come under the regulated umbrella. It's there, and I think he really is considering it. And that is the fix.
There you go.
I'd like to revisit something that was talked about just a moment or two ago about educating people and requiring certain amount of education prior to allowing them to get into the cannabis industry. Logically, this makes sense, but time is our enemy. And what I mean by that is every day that someone is studying to learn about cannabis and to be qualified for a cannabis business license, somebody else snatches one up. And sooner or later, all of the good licenses and the opportunities are gone. And when the legacy market people come into this opportunity after they've passed all these hurdles, there may not be a realistic opportunity for them to realize that American dream. So I completely understand why we want to try and make sure people that are given the opportunity to have a business can do it successfully. But I'm also concerned about making people wait to find their fortune, if that makes sense.
Right. So Rick, to that point, I don't think it's a wait, but it certainly is a requirement either upon licensing or after a certain time after you are licensed, that you do get some form of certification, whether you're touching the plant. Well, I believe it's all about touching the plant. If you're doing transportation or home delivery, have a clean driving record. But for other operations, aspects of operations, it can come later.
Gotcha. Hey, Edmund DeVeaux, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, sir. I also am going to give you a compliment because I watched the interview you did with Senator, is it Nicholas Scuderi? Did I do that
Scutari,
right?
Yes, Nick Scutari.
Whatever it was. You know what? Scuderi is probably a football player. My brain is still in sports. Anyway, you did a really nice job. And the one thing that I did take out of that interview was a soundbite about home grow, which is not allowed according to these regulations at this time in New Jersey, but he definitely left the window open for future changes. That's got to be encouraging to you.
Absolutely. It's again, one of those questions that we get. Where do you fall on that issue? And ultimately, look, whether we support it or not, it's going to be a function of the legislature and it's going to be a function of the CRC. When somebody puts that bill in, introduces the bill, we'll be right there with the medical community supporting medical home grow.
Right. And you know what? Those are the people that need it the most as a medicine, not the adult use recreational fun group, if you will. Not that I'm dissing them at all. We get it. Okay. But this is still a plant medicine. And that alone has got us to this point. So I never want people to forget that that is still in the works, if you will. Edmund DeVeaux, New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. Thank you again for coming on. You're turning into a regular. You're welcome anytime, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Rick. Always good to see you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.